Every South Louisiana family knows what it feels like to walk in a place that holds a history of its own. Maybe it was your grandmother's house where you sat around the kitchen table, exchanging stories and sharing bowls of gumbo. Or maybe it's the small country church where generations of your family have been baptized, confirmed, and buried. And when you step inside these places, no one needs to tell you that they're special. You feel it. The air is thick with prayer, and the walls of the home could tell a story. That's what the Lateran Basilica means to the Catholic Church. On November 9th of the year 324, Pope St. Sylvester consecrated it as the first public church in the Christian world, after the Emperor Constantine made it legal for the Christian faith to be practiced. It stood on land that was once owned by the Lateran family. It was built on the Lateran Hill, which is where it gets its name. But it became something far greater, the Cathedral of the Bishop of Rome, the mother and head of all the churches of the city and of the world. If asked, what is the most important church in the Catholic faith? Some might say St. Peter's Basilica, which is very important. The Pope lives there. But that is not the Pope's cathedral. St. John Lateran is. And it's from the chair of St. Peter there that he acts with his authority as the heir to the apostle St. Peter. Beneath the high altar of St. John Lateran is a wooden table where tradition tells us St. Peter himself offered the Eucharist there. From that altar, the church began to grow, her sacraments flowing outward like a river across the world. It's a reminder that our faith is not an idea or a trendy movement. It is the home built by Christ on apostolic foundations. Now, some might wonder why the dedication of a church in Rome matters to us here in South Louisiana. Well, the answer is simple, yet profound, as many church teachings are. Because that church is our mother. The Lateran Basilica is the cathedral of the Pope, now Pope Leo XIV, who is the visible sign of unity for every Catholic on earth. He is that endless, unbroken chain stretching all the way back to Pope Peter. And so to celebrate its dedication is to remember that we belong to something far greater and larger than just our parish boundaries. Our faith, our church, our communion is not contingent on a church committee or a pastor. It is Catholic because it comes from a mother. Every church, every Catholic church, can trace her heritage all the way back to St. John Lateran. It all started there. And from there, the apostles, the disciples went out into the world and began founding new churches. Even our church has a mother church, St. Anthony of Padua in Eunice. From her, our church was born, which is why we have a statue of St. Anthony, by the way, to pay honor to our mother church. And before St. Anthony was there, she had a mother church, St. John the Evangelist Cathedral in Lafayette, which is our mother church. And why? Because the chair of Bishop Deschatel is in that cathedral, reminding us that we belong to an even greater family. And because we're united with our Bishop Deschatel, we're united with the Catholic Church throughout the world. The same faith that was professed in Rome 17 centuries ago is the same faith that we profess here today. When we honor that mother church, we renew our own identity as living stones in the one church Christ built upon Peter. Over time, we forget what it means to be in a holy place. Naturally, we start to see churches as buildings or programs or venues, photo backdrops, instead of sacred dwellings of God. We measure them by convenience rather than reverence. And while we say that we love the church, sometimes we treat her like a business to be managed or a club to be maintained. It's a spiritual wound. When we lose reverence for the house of God, holiness fades from our lives. The danger is subtle, like all sin is. The sacred becomes familiar, the familiar becomes routine, and the routine becomes empty. It's not that we stop believing, it's just that we stop noticing the presence of God. While the Second Vatican Council was a beautiful council that gave us many beautiful teachings, the spirit that some took to themselves, their own ideas, their own desires, and we especially suffered that as the church in America, the focus became less on the sacred temple and more of the people that made it up. You saw churches being built in the round so that the focus was no longer on the altar but the people themselves. And in doing so, we put the focus on the people more than the sacred house, but we need both. We need both the house of God to be a sacred dwelling place and us to be a sacred dwelling place. And we know that this was not an inspired idea because as time went on, belief in the theology of the Eucharist began to plummet because now it was about us. And we know that we're not always reverent with ourselves. The dignity of the human person continues to go down and down and down. Abortion in the millions, the adult entertainment industry through the roof. It all comes together, folks. Lex orandi, lex credendi. How we pray is how we believe, is how we live. That's exactly what Jesus saw when he walked into the temple in today's gospel. He saw a people that no longer had a sense of the sacred. He saw the animals and the noise. He saw the money changing hands. The temple of God had become noisy and commercial, like many churches today. Very focused on entertainment and ideas and trends. And the people began to use God's house to serve their own desires. But you see, the money changers were essential to the temple worship. Pilgrims came from all over the world to make an offering at the temple, and so they needed to exchange their coins to buy the offerings to be sacrificed in the temple. However, there was a marketplace a little bit down the ways that people could go and shop. But the merchant said, we could make a lot more money, and it'd be so much more convenient for the people if we set up in the entryway of the temple. The reason that Jesus was so indignant is that they had set up in the court of the Gentiles, the very place where the people who weren't Jewish could come and have an encounter with the one true God of Israel. So that's why he begins to flip over tables. Because there's a time and place for everything, and this ain't it. Take your stuff and bring it back where it belongs. Stop making my Father's house into a marketplace. The zeal that he had was righteous indignation. It was a love that refused to let the holy be treated as ordinary. And that zeal should manifest in us as well. We tolerate, unfortunately, some dishonor to God's house on occasion. And it's not that we do it intentionally, but once again, it's how we think of the world around us and our idea of the sacred. Time and time again, I show up at a wedding or a funeral, and I have to go up to the pulpit and say, please be mindful that Jesus is present in the tabernacle of the Blessed Sacrament. Could you please take your conversations outside the church? First, I have to say, excuse me, because it sounds like a restaurant or a theater or a coliseum. People are talking and having loud conversations. And people get a little upset. Well, Father, we were just talking. Fellowship is not wrong, just like the money changers weren't wrong. Wrong place, wrong time. This church sits on 4.12 acres of property, one of which is dedicated to prayer and worship. Go talk on the other 3 acres. That's why we have this house of prayer, so that people can come here and pray. But it's not convenient to sit in silence. And so we start to talk. We don't have merchants in our courtyard, but we do have our own tables that clutter the temple of our hearts, and that's what Jesus is trying to say. What we do out in the world reveals what we believe. We have the noise of screens and schedules, the distractions of pride and resentment, and it reveals itself in the way that we fill every silence with something less than God. And yet, the beautiful thing about Jesus is that he still comes to us. Every time we step into the church, he's here, he's walking the aisles, and he's examining what we're doing, but only to ask a question: is there room for me to dwell there? He has a whip, but this time it's mercy. Mercy that stings far worse than any physical strike. Like that time you do something wrong, you disappoint your mother, and she doesn't forgive you, and at that point you just wish she'd hit you or say something, because the tension is killing me. That disappointment. Either forgive me or hit me. Don't just let me sit here. And Jesus brings that mercy with him. His zeal is love, and instead of driving us out, he draws us in to drive out all those things that don't belong in the temple of our hearts. Because he will not share his temple with false idols. St. Paul says, you are God's building. Do you not know that you are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? You are living tabernacles, because you carry within yourself Jesus Christ. Reverence for this building should reawaken the reverence for the sanctuary of our own souls. And as a reminder that when we genuflect before the tabernacle, we're not performing an empty ritual, but we are showing humility to Christ the King, the living presence of God who dwells among us. This is why our Catholic churches matter. This is why we should choose to go without, so that this church is here for centuries to come. Because churches are not relics of a bygone age, nor are they architectural statements. They are fountains of grace in a world dying of thirst. From this sanctuary, mercy flows into marriage, healing flows into the sick, forgiveness flows through the confessional, and charity flows into the lives of the poor and the forgotten. But if we let our church become a marketplace, a meeting place, a social venue, just another place that we pass through, then we become the obstacles that block the river of God's grace. But when reverence comes to life in our souls again, the rivers burst through us again. A Catholic church is not a building with 4 walls, a floor, and a roof. It is the dwelling place of God the Most High. That is what the Lateran Basilica represents. Her majesty is our majesty. Not pride in stones, but thanksgiving for a living continuity. 2,000 years in the making. And remember, earlier today, because Rome is 8 hours ahead of us, Pope Leo XIV celebrated Mass at the Basilica of St. John Lateran. The same Eucharist he consecrated on the altar there is the same Eucharist that you will receive in a few moments. Same Jesus, same church, same Spirit, same living water. So today we give thanks for these sacred walls that have sheltered decades of prayer, for the tabernacle that glows by candlelight each day, reminding us of Christ's presence here, and for our altar, where we are privileged to witness heaven touch earth. But we also hear the Lord's call. He is not content with bricks alone. He is not content to just visit our heart like a tourist. He is the rightful owner, and he wants to come home and make his dwelling in us. When Christ enters the temple of our lives, he will overturn what doesn't belong, our pride, our indifference, our idols of comfort, and restore us to the order of his love. Let him. Because when he looks into the temple of your heart, I pray that he finds a place that is always open to his grace. May he make his dwelling in each of us. And from this place, the temple of the Spirit of God, may his mercy begin to flow again through you, through me, into our families, and to every corner of the world. Because, y'all, the world is thirsty. Everything we see in the media and in the news, it's not necessarily showing us evil. It's revealing to us who know the struggle of humans and sin. It reveals to us the thirst that the people of the world have for goodness, truth, and beauty. And we have it. We have the life-giving waters that they need. As long as we do our part to make sure that the fountain of his grace is here waiting for them when they come and ask for a sip of cold water. As Jesus says, blessed are you who give a cup of cold water to the little ones that come here asking for something to drink.